Alrighty. And I'm going to share my screen. Entire screen. Okay. Okay. How's it going, everyone? We all good?
Good, good. Thank you.
Stuff, good stuff. Okay, right. So let's set the scene first of all. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Rob. I am one of the admins in Zubair's school community. In my day job, I am actually a software engineering manager, managing teams of engineers across multiple locations. So I've been in the realm of software development for the last probably 10 years. Now, I haven't been writing code for all that time because I chose to be a manager, so I don't write as much as I used to. But I am still surrounded every day by people who write code. So I find this stuff really interesting. Running teams of people, productivity is a big thing, no matter what field you're in. And to me, Cursor AI and AI in general, the increase in productivity it gives you is phenomenal, which is why I wanted to talk to you about it today. Because there are, especially if you're not used to writing software, there are certain things that are going to help you out. Now, caveat before I get into going through what Cursor is, this is going to be focused on the folks who don't know how to write code and don't want to. Okay. This is going to be focused on how you use Cursor as a tool to actually write the code for you and how you interact with it and get the best out of it. Okay. So this is Cursor. So I'm not going to bore you with like how you set up an account and all that. I'm sure you're all very smart people and you could figure out how to find the Cursor website and sign up and download it. But just bear in mind that this is a desktop application, so this is not going to run like Lovable in your Chrome browser or whatever. This is a desktop application. So when you download it, it's going to ask you to sign in and all that good stuff, and you're going to be presented with this screen. And this is where it all starts, right? So what you can do in here is you've got a view of all your recent projects. So these are all mine, things that I've been working on. You can open a project, which is essentially just open a folder. It's they overcomplicate it, but that's what that is. The interesting bit, I think, for folks on this call is less project structure and code implementation and more how do I set this up so it is the easiest to use for me. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that. Oh my goodness, there's a lot of people joining. All righty. Okay, so that's the landing page. Now, from there, we want to set ourselves up before we even think about writing a line of code. And there are some things that you need to do, in my view, to get this to a good working spot, right? So in the settings, a quick overview of what's in here. So you have your bog standard display and keyboard shortcuts and all that kind of stuff. If that's what you're into, work away. I'm not going to focus too much on that today. Cursor, tab, and chat. So like these two combined are actually how you will interact. And we'll get into how to actually interact with these things as we work through this. Basically, I would advise you to, turn tab on, turn chat and edit mode on. This one, if you've been doing any research in Cursor, you may have heard of YOLO mode. Does that ring a bell with everybody?
Can you repeat, please?
Sorry, yeah. So if you've been doing any homework on Cursor at all, you may have come across this feature, which is what they were called. This was actually called YOLO mode. So this enable auto run mode. This is basically you point the AI at the thing you want to do, and you take your hands away and you stop talking to it. And in theory, it does the thing for you. In practice, I've not had the best experience with that because of context windows, and we'll get into context windows in a little while, why they're important and why you really need to think about the information that you're giving this thing. So by all means, if you want to play around with it, turn this auto run mode on, see what it does. Don't let it loose on a project that you're actually working on because it does some weird stuff when it starts to forget what you told it at the start. There are some other features in here. So you can turn on, you want as much context as you can on this, I guess. So context window, let's talk about context window while we're here. So what is a context window? So this is the most frustrating thing for me at the minute about using LLM is context window. So a context window is exactly what it says. It's a window, and it's a moving window. And it's essentially memory. How much can an LLM hold in its memory at one point? Now, you can imagine if you're working through a project and you're working on it over several hours, you're going to be back and forward a lot. You're going to be telling Cursor to go and look at particular files or look at particular folders, and it's going to add those to its context as it goes along, because what it's trying to do is remember everything you told it such that it can build you the thing that you want. But that moves, right? So as you move along, if you've been talking to it for an hour, it will forget the thing that you said at the start of the hour, because it only has a context window of 200,000 tokens, which equates to about 200,000 words. It sounds like a lot, but when you're talking to it about whole code bases, that's actually not a lot at all, and it can't hold all that in its memory. So you just got to be careful about how much you're asking it to think about in one go. That being said, turn this on, because larger context is better. It will negate some of this stuff, not all of it, but it will negate some of it. Okay, so moving down, code base indexing. Now, this is loading here at the minute for me because this is an empty project. I haven't done anything with it yet, but what this is really cool, because actually what this does, thinking about code context as well, again, it creates embeddings and metadata. So not your actual code, but embeddings and metadata that are based on your code, and it uploads them to the cloud to try and keep your entire code base in context. Now, the larger the code base, the less effective this is, but for smaller stuff, this is really useful. So just make sure you have that turned on. It's unless you have super sensitive code that you worry about sharing with the world, like I just leave this on all the time because I don't, right? The next thing that is super useful is this docs piece, right? So you want Cursor to know, or you want Cursor to have the opportunity to be able to research as much as it can based on what you are doing. This is where this feature is really useful. So, for example, if you go, let me just grab a docs page for a minute, and I'll show you what I'm saying. Docs, doc, GitLab, docs. Okay, so just for example, GitLab, GitLab and Git in general, these have an amazing set of documentation. But as a human being, trying to keep it all in your head at once is an impossibility. And unless you have some way of quickly accessing this, or in this case, have Cursor have some way of quickly accessing this, you will spend a lot of your time in docs trying to figure out the exact thing that you need. And that's where this docs feature comes in really useful, because literally what you do is you say, grab your URL for where your docs are. You come in here. Now, I think I have this added anyway. I do down there. But you literally just paste in the docs. And then what it will do, it will go to the docs website and it will index every page in the docs website. So as you were building applications, let's say you're building something in React, I have the React docs plugged in here. So if I go and look at see pages, I can see that it's indexed essentially the full set of React docs. It's indexed 98 pages. So it's not holding it in its memory, but it knows where to go and get it. Does that make sense? Cool. Okay. As much as you can in here, as you can see, I probably overload this a little bit, but as much as you can in here, because it helps you just be able to say, go and check Supabase for the actual implementation, or go and check React, or go and check Tailwind or whatever, and just make sure we are, using the right approach. So that is docs. Okay. We can probably leave the rest of that stuff. Okay. So models. You can see you have a lot to choose from in here. There's two ways of using models in this. There is through Cursor, which I would advise you to do, or there is using your API directly, which you can do down here by putting in your API key. Now, Cursor have some kind of deal and especially with like Claude and OpenAI, they have some kind of deals in there that their requests are cheaper than if you make the request directly. And I can give you an exact example of this from yesterday, right? So I was fighting with the code base yesterday, lost my temper with it in Cursor, and thought I'm going to use Cline to have a look at this instead. So I went over to Cline. The Cline is just direct API access only. You just tell it where your API is, or you tell it about the Claude API, you give it your API key, and off it goes. I spent probably 5 or 6 hours interacting with Cline yesterday, and it cost me about $75. So it is not cheap to do it that way, and that's why I advise you can come in here and turn all these on and off, but you'll see the difference pretty much immediately in your Anthropic console if you start going directly. So I'd advise you just use them as they have them set up in here, and let Cursor make those calls, because actually when it's making those calls, I think what it's doing in the background is actually optimizing it. So instead of just sending your whole code base, it's picking out the bit it needs or picking out the bit of the doc it needs, and it's sending it to Anthropic or whatever, and it doesn't eat up so much of your budget effectively. What are the best models to use is a good question. So this, not contentious, but like this got a little bit more expensive in the past couple of days anyway, right? So if you're asking me what model should you use to write your code, I am only going to say Claude Sonnet models. In my experience, nothing comes close to these in terms of the quality of the outputs that you get, not just in terms of actual code it writes, but also in terms of the actual styling you get from it, because it understands code and it understands styling really, really well. So these are the three that you would use. Now, what are the difference between 3.5 Sonnet? Is less verbose. It has a tendency to over-engineer less. Okay. Ralph, you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick one. Sorry to interrupt, but since you're in the context of this, and I missed maybe a few pieces. I have a Claude account. I pay $20 a month. I use the API key in here, and that's all it costs me. So what did I miss something when it comes to payments, or am I?
No, good question.
Bill.
Yeah. Okay. So if you were not inputting your own API key in here, which I advise you not to do, what you're actually doing is paying Cursor. So you pay Cursor $20 a month, and then you get a budget of what they call fast responses, and then after that it's slower responses. So they give you 500 responses a month for your $20, which are fast responses. So essentially go to the head of the queue when it's queuing up responses in the background. So you don't actually need to put your API key into, or I did just because I was playing around with it. You don't need to do that. You can leave all these API keys here blank, and you can just tell it, these are the models I want to use. And then when you're chatting to it, you can just pick one of these and it will do it in the background. So that's what I'm saying. It's cheaper to do it this way than use your own API key. You can do either, but your own API key is very expensive, especially like if you're in this all day long, it gets very expensive very quickly. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
All right, cool. Good question. Okay, where are we? Yeah, models, right. So very briefly, 3.5 Sonnet. Probably my preferred at the minute, because like we're saying, it's less verbose than 3.7. 3.7 is very good, but I think it has a tendency to over-engineer slightly and write slightly too much, more code than it needs to actually get the job done. Where 3.7 is really useful, and we'll get into this in a minute, is when there is an option to utilize the thinking mode. So when you're planning, 3.7 Sonnet will give you really detailed, excellent plans to work from. And then you can store them in README files, and then have 3.5 just reference your README files. And again, we'll get to this in a minute. But in order of preference, for everyday use, for normal use, 3.5 Sonnet, and then you get into Sonnet Max. This is a little bit controversial. So, like I was saying earlier, Claude in particular has a context window of 200,000 tokens. By default, Cursor does not let you use all those 200,000 tokens. So they're allowing you to do it now, but they've introduced this Sonnet Max. This is use on top of your $20 a month. This is 5 cents per call that it makes and 5 cents per tool call that it makes. Now again, it's still cheaper than going directly to your own, using your own API key. But this is, just be aware that if you turn this on and if you have Max left on, what's actually going to happen is you're going to build a bill in the background. You can see it all in your Cursor dashboard. You can look at your usage and all that kind of stuff in there. It is very good and it is very useful, but it's not the cheapest way to do it. And for 95% of the stuff that you folks are going to want, 3.5 Sonnet, perfectly good, and better than anything else that we have in here. Any questions about that?
I did have a question. I'm sorry, Rob, and I know you kind of answered, but I didn't get a chance to ask it. On the API, you said not to use the API here.
Yeah, because this, like, if you don't put your API key in here, what you're actually doing is paying Cursor to just manage all that in the background. So for 20, like I was saying, for your $20 a month that you pay to Cursor, they give you a bunch of really fast requests. When your fast requests run out, you can still make requests. It's just a little bit slower. So there's never, in my opinion, a need to actually have your API key in here, because Cursor is managing that in the background, and it is cheaper. It's way cheaper to use Cursor to do it.
So when you choose one of those models, it already has, it makes the connection in the back end because of the fee that we pay in the monthly.
Yes, correct.
Okay, understood. That's what I was looking for you. Thank you.
No problem. Good question. Okay, that's probably okay. So rules. This is where you dictate how you want it to behave and any kind of structured guidelines you want it to abide by. Okay, so from an engineering perspective, this is really useful for me because depending on the technology, I want to be able to pick and choose how it thinks about creation of code base, structure, file structure, code structure, all that kind of stuff. And you might be saying to yourself, as a non-software engineering person, well, how am I going to know how to do all that? And that's a really good question. So the answer is, now you kind of don't have to. So let me just grab that one. So if you make a note of this, cursor.directory. Okay, so this is a really useful site because it has a few different things on here that you can use. What we're talking about at the minute is rules. We'll get to MCPs shortly. But essentially, let's say I know I'm going to build the majority of my applications in React or Next.js or whatever. You don't need to be an expert in any of those things. Once you start using one or the other, you'll come up with a preference. That's as much as you need to know. I like one better than the other. That's good enough. But actually what you need is some instructions to the models that actually, how are you going to structure your code? How are you going to think about testing, all that kind of stuff. Now, this is where this is really useful. So this is a set of rules for a bunch of stuff that you just get to copy and paste, which is great, right? So if we're looking at React, which I use a lot, here are a bunch of different rule sets that you can just copy from here and you take them straight back into Cursor and you just paste in here. And this, every time your Cursor application makes a call or makes a decision, it's using this as a basis to make that decision. Does that make sense?
Can I ask you?
Of course.
Sorry for interrupting you. We was speaking before with Alex, and I give him the GitHub link for the Cursor rules. And what do you suggest to do with that ones? Do you suggest to put them straight to your rules file, or do you suggest them to put in the docs and then create your own rules file based on that GitHub file, GitHub repository?
So this is where playing around with experimentation is going to come in, really, because you're going to end up with your own preference on what to do here, right? So for me personally, I know that 99% of the stuff I build is going to be in React, right? So I copy paste this rule set, I just leave it in there and I forget about it, right? You do have the option. So this is your instructions to Cursor generally, right? So this is all the stuff I want to observe. If you want to customize that more, you do have this other section down here, which is project rules. So in here, you can say, yes, I'm giving you all the instructions on how to think about Next.js or whatever. But actually, for this specific project, there's some other stuff I need you to know. Like we're going to be dealing with databases in the back end. So there's actually some things I need you to observe with databases. You can put those in here. And when you move to another project, they stay here and your global rule set comes with you. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Hey, Rob, real quick, before we move on, I know that you put the path, the rule. Where is that locally? Is that online to get those rules?
Oh, I'm sorry. 1 second. Let me just grab back. So that can you see that?
Yep, I see that. Okay,
Yeah, cursor.directory.
directory. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and then down the side, you see all the different technologies that we have instructions for, so you can pick and choose to your heart's content. Okay, so that is rules. Alrighty. Any more questions about rules before we move on? Rock and roll. Okay, so MCP, I'm going to skim, because Zubair has put videos out on MCP, and I know he has more to come. Nate has put some out, Cole has put some out, and I think there's enough information out there between those two. Those are the three that I look at if you want explanations for stuff. And I think there's enough in there for you folks to go and have a look at those and get a grip on what MCPs are, and how they're useful. Word of caution on MCPs. MCP as a technology is brand spanking new, right? So when you go and look at MCP servers that you can run or use in Cursor or with Claude Desktop or whatever, the majority of the MCP servers are a person has written them, right? Not a company, not an official, I don't know, Stripe or like all that kind of. Stripe's a bad example because they actually have their own, but there's not a lot of official companies out there that have their MCP service. Now the difference between, just very briefly, without MCPs, what you need to do is interact with APIs, right? So that is, your code needs to know in the background exactly where to go to. The problem with APIs is they're very specific in the thing that you can ask for. So it's not like you have one API to call and it will give you all the information. That's not how they work. Actually, what would happen in the background is you might have 12 APIs for the same tool that you need to figure out how to use. MCP in theory abstracts that away, and it essentially just creates a tool for your agent, and your agent is able to query that MCP server and say, okay, tell me what information you need from me to be able to query, and tell me what tools I have. So it's way less structured, has super good potential, I think. But for me personally, like, I am not putting that into, like if you're using N8N, for example, I'm not putting that into a customer build, because I just don't have enough confidence in it yet as a developed technology. That said, I'm not trying to steer you away from it. I do think it's super useful. I mean, you can see here, I have MCPs plugged into my Cursor that I find useful for me. So for those of you that don't know, Archon is written by Cole Medin. It's a framework to build agents effectively using Pydantic. I have GitHub for obvious reasons for my code, and then I have Brave Search for when I search the web, because although Cursor does have native web search capabilities, Brave Search is better. So I have Brave Search in there. So again, like, I don't want to spend a bunch of time on MCPs. Does anyone have any questions on this before we move on?
How far away do you think it is, Rob, until MCP becomes mainstream and everything's ironed out?
Yeah, like we're not like what you have at the minute is early adopters like me. And you've all probably seen that curve of like adoption, right? So you have your early adopters, very few and far between. At that point, like, it's very much like, when 3D printers come out first, and they're very technical, and like it took you 3 hours to be able to set, like, you wanted to, difficult to use. And you look at one now, and they are completely plug and play. You don't really have to know a lot. You can download models and plug it into your 3D printer, and it'll do it for you. We are very early with MCP servers, so we're at that very technical early stage.
Right.
In my view, probably 18 months, 2 years away from like mass adoption of these, because I do think it will be mass adoption eventually, because I think it has great potential. And in a world where
Mhm.
everybody is leaning into agentic capabilities, this kind of stuff is going to become really important. But today, we're not quite there yet.
It's an early protocol that most companies need to adapt. So I think we also need to take security
Yeah.
into account to ensure that it's not plug and play yet. So as your point being made, it is very technical. So you do have to know what you're doing in order to start playing with it. So
Yeah. And like even plugging it in is a pain in the butt. Like I fight with this stuff to get this going. And you can see one of them's broken on me now, and I'll have to go figure out why that is. But what they have in here, like if you're adding one, you need to know what the command is, you need to know what the arguments are, you need to be able to figure out. So you can see in here, I have batch files. This is how I get these to work. This is my workaround because I can't get npx or npm to work in this. And for the lay person who is looking at this, like this is going to make no sense. And like that's not throwing shade at everyone. That's just reality of the world, right? If you're not used to dealing with code and JSON and all this kind of stuff, like this isn't going to make any sense. So like this will steer people away who aren't used to dealing with this. But like I say, very good for experimentation. There's lots of cool stuff out there that you can do, which is super interesting. And it's, yeah, I think over the next kind of 18 months, 2 years, you'll see this really develop as more and more agentic capabilities are, spun up by different companies. So do keep an eye on it. Okay, so that is there anything in beta? No, there isn't. Okay, so that's the guts of the settings. Okay. So that was all very boring. How do we actually get going in this? So I'm gonna just, we're half an hour into this. The chances of getting something actually finished working at the end was fairly slim at the start. Probably more slim now because I waffled on for half an hour. So what I'm gonna try and do is, rather than like fight with this for the next 30 minutes to really try and get something built, I'm going to show you how you should be preparing to get something built. Because actually, if you want to get the best out of this, preparation is your friend. Okay. What is preparation and what the hell am I talking about? Right. So this is Claude Desktop. So I was having a conversation with Claude Desktop this morning about what's an easy thing to build in an hour. What can I use as a demo? And we landed on the fact that Markdown preview. So if you've been in school for any length of time, all those cool headings and emojis and all that kind of stuff, like that's Markdown, right? So in the background, there's specific formatting, tags, etc. That's Markdown. So you don't type it like you see it on screen. It just appears very cool when you put it in there. And like README files, I'm sure you've all read README files and wondered why there's hashtags at the start of every line. That's Markdown essentially. Essentially, it's a way of styling your natural language text. So what you need to do is say, okay, Claude, here's my idea. I want to build a Markdown preview tool. But what I actually need is you to help me flesh this out, right? So you can take your like 2, 3, 4 line prompt and put it in Cursor, and it will give you something, but it won't be great. You'll spend a lot of hours tweaking it to actually get it to where you want to be at the start. So the first thing you need to do is have Claude help you write a PRD, a product requirement document. Now, depending on the complexity of your project, this document will be more or less complex. So I would say for getting used to this stuff, simple ideas, single pages, not complicated styling, and then your PRD will not be hugely long. So you can see what's in a PRD. So the purpose of the application, first of all, the user flows, technical requirements, success criteria, and a very high level overview of phases of development in here. So you have this. Now what you need to do is come up with an actual, because this is all high level. You can see like in the testing phase or in the phase 3, there's 3 steps. Like that's not really going to give Cursor enough to be able to work off to actually build you what you want. So the second thing you do is you say, okay, thank you very much for this, but actually what I need is a better implementation plan of what we're going to do. Now again, this is simple because I'm talking about a simple application, but I have other PRDs which are thousands of lines long. Again, depending on your project, these will be more or less complicated. But you can see it gives me the steps in here. So what you do now is you have your PRD, which is your actual requirements. You have a high-level implementation plan. So you create yourself a new folder. Let's just call it just demo. And then you have Cursor open that folder, and you are presented with this screen. There's nothing on here because we've done nothing yet, right? So let's talk about where we start with this stuff. So the very first thing, so we have our 2 documents, right? So the very first thing we're going to say is, or the very first thing we're going to do is create a folder in here. So this is that folder we just opened, test demo. So we're going to create a new folder in here, and we're going to call it documentation. Okay. To this, let me just grab that open. Grab my 2 docs. Okay, so we'll use these for now, that's fine. So now, the very first files we have in there is our PRD and a sample output of what we want. That's enough to get us going with this, right? So next, you want to tell Cursor to pay attention to these when it's building, right? Because this is what it's going to build off. So you can, Chase, you had a question?
Yeah, quick totally noob question here. Does it matter where we put our folder? Like, does this need to be, like, can we just put it on our desktop, or does it need to be in the a certain place?
No, you can put it wherever you want, dude.
Okay, cool. Awesome.
Just when you have it, your documentation folder should go in the root of your project, so you can, because if you have it buried in somewhere, you forget where you put it, and it makes it difficult to find. So first thing in here, before you create any other folders, documentation, put it in there. But like your actual root level folder, you put that wherever you want. It really doesn't matter.
Cool. Thanks.
No problem. Okay. So the next thing I done with Claude was like, cool, thanks for the docs. Now I want to build the thing, but I don't want to write the prompt myself to build the thing. So I had it write the prompt for me, and this is what we're going to feed in now, right? So here is create a simple markdown viewer, preview, React application, blah, 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 core functionality, styling, yada, 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 yada. So we copy that, and we go back to Cursor, and we say, I want you to build me the application specified in the docs. Below is the prompt to get you started. Okay, so then we do 9, we paste that in there, and we hit send. Now at this point, it's going to do a bunch of stuff. If you have that YOLO mode thing turned on, it will not ask you questions like, should I create this folder? Or should I initialize? It will just do it. I'm not a big fan of that. I want to have some control over what it's doing. So it's asking me here, it wants to make a new directory called Markdown Previewer, and then change into that directory and then initialize the project. So that's all cool. So it's going to cycle through a few of these. And you can see it's not a bug, but it's an annoyance. It forgets what, it gets confused between bash and batch commands, but it will figure it out eventually. This is the beautiful thing about Cursor. So you just got to let it do its thing, and it will figure out. So you see we started off with like quite complicated commands, and now it's like, well, actually that's probably too complicated. Let me just go simple. So you just let it run through. Come on. And this is initializing. So this is your initial project. npm init y is it setting up the application in the background. It's going to ask you to install some dependencies, which you just let it do.
How much of this do we need to know, Rob, in terms of, looks like you're accepting a lot of things. Do we need to actually know what we're accepting, or is it pretty reliable?
It's pretty good. Honestly, it's pretty good. Now, should you accept commands blindly? Oh. So copy paste, or yeah, like have Claude open or whatever your LLM choice is. Copy paste that in and say, can you just explain to this to me, please? Just to make sure you understand. But now, I'm probably skipping through that too quick because I'm used to it and I kind of understand what it's doing. But if you don't understand those commands, please do be careful of them because some of them will be delete commands. And you want to make sure it's not deleting your files when it shouldn't be. Now, it doesn't really do that a lot, but like I definitely had occasion where it's deleted the wrong thing. So you just need to be careful of it. So for the first, as you get used to using this, if you see a command you don't know, have Claude open in another screen, copy paste, tell me what this is, move on with your life. You know what I mean? Just to make sure you're clear on it. Come on. Okay. So what I'm actually going to do, I think, is rather than have you wait around while it figures out what it's doing here, because it will take a few minutes to do this, I'm going to show you a project. It was kind of designed for this, honestly. Okay. So I'm going to move that off screen. I'm going to just keep it going in the background. I'm going to show you kind of what you end up with eventually. So after some time of playing with it and letting it run in the background, what you'll end up with is something that looks similar to this. So this is, for all intents and purposes, this is your working application. Now, this is the most basic thing I could build because that's what I set out to do. I built this in 25 minutes, I think, including putting the documentation together at the start. Really, really simple. Because I just wanted to show what's possible. Now, you can see in here, if you start to dig into any of this stuff, there is a ton of files in here. How long does it take a human being to write these files? Week, couple of weeks. This took 25 minutes. This is the actual beauty of it. You just tell it what you want to do, and it will figure out how to do it. And when it makes a mistake, it will figure out how to rectify it. It's great. So what this actually, can I just go? Let me go here. NPM. There you go. So, oh, bear with me. I have another application running on the same port. 1 second. 1 second. Let me close down some of this stuff. Try again. Randall, question while I'm bumbling around here.
Yeah, I thought this would be a good opportunity to ask the question. So I've been trying to build some cool blown applications, but it'll get a little bit, about halfway into building an application, then it starts breaking it. Is there a better way? Like, could we build these smaller and more modular and then try to take these components and bring them back into Cursor and ask Cursor to put them back together and make them work collectively? Like, I am really struggling to build a full-blown application with these AI.
So you gotta do this in pieces, right? So I will eventually figure out where that application is, and I'll show you this website, but you got to do it in pieces. So like, and especially once you start to get into any level of complexity, like you can't expect to just give it a PRD and a prompt and it will go and build front end, back end, database connection. Like it will get lost. It will run out of context. It will forget where it was at the start. And that's where you end up in that situation where it's like, well, why is it doing that? It's because it ran, that context window has moved and all the stuff you told it to do at the start has gone away. So the best thing you can do is think about the features you have on your site or you want to have in your site or your app or whatever. So like I want to have a header, I want to have a footer, I want to have an image carousel, I want to have a contact form, whatever they are, right?
Mhm.
So for every new feature that you want to build, start a new chat. Make sure that before you start into it, you kind of understand that this is a small piece of work that I can probably get through in 3 or 4 prompts and it will do the thing. Once you're happy with that, start a new chat.
Right.
Do the next feature.
I think where I'm struggling is I'm trying to create like a PandaDoc clone or like a DocuSign clone to implement in an application for a lawyer. 'Cause they need to be able to have conditional sections and stuff like that, show and hide. And I'm getting stuck in the drag and drop section. I got the drag and drop working great, but then I want to be able to like place them side by side in a column, and then it breaks the code, and it's like it's really frustrating.
Yeah. So this is having been in this game for 10 years, this is 95% of your time, even with Cursor, will be like, what the hell is it doing that for? And you have those 5% to actually finish out and you get what you want. But like, for example, I have another application that I'm building in the background, and I won't share because it's pretty huge. But I'm trying to build a backend database API layer for it. And I've been fighting with that thing for 3 days. Now it is making progress, but it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, one step back. If I was writing the code from scratch myself, the process would be exactly the same, because what I think most people don't think about when you're thinking about writing code is 100% explicit. It will do or not do the exact thing that you tell it. And like Cursor and LLMs are no different to that. So if you're giving it a prompt and it's getting confused, you probably need to think about, okay, well, how do I make that prompt smaller? How do I make that feature smaller? How do I give it less to think about? Because the more it has in its context window as well, the more chance it's going to get confused about what it's doing. Does that help at all?
Yeah, no, that definitely helps out a lot, man. And I'm like trying to build a front end in Vercel and then import it into Cursor. And then, I was having so much trouble in Vercel. Yeah. And so I thought, well, let me try Cursor. So I downloaded Cursor, paid for the pro version, got in there, and Cursor wasn't doing much better. I mean, a little bit better, but not much. I'm like, what am I doing wrong? Everybody keeps raving about these AI code writing tools. I keep finding them to just be kind of crap and lackluster.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's LLMs, right? So like, people put LLMs on a pedestal, like they are the be all and end all of like, they can do everything for you. They can't, right? That's the honest to God's truth. They can't even get close to that. And like you just run into these issues when you're building anything of any complexity. This is the kind of issues that you run into. But that's why it's important to keep this stuff small. So like I would say, without looking at your project or really understanding what you're going to do, go back, break it into the smallest sections of value that you possibly can. It might just be, just do this contact form. Don't do anything else in the background of the contact form. Just do the contact form for now. Once you have your contact form, do the connection in the background to whatever your contact form is sending to. Just keep it small all the time. Like that's like if I was writing software myself, that's how I do it. I have it broken down into the smallest, most valuable pieces I can. I'll just go piece by piece, because the other thing is when you just give it a command and let it go, when it does break, it's really hard to figure out where it broke because it's done so much. Like, how do you backtrack? You're not in there writing that code. You'd have to go line by line yourself to try and figure that stuff out. The way to get around that is modular. Be modular with everything that you have. Go small all of the time.
Hey Rob, can I add something, to that? And just, I know you're the expert on this, but obviously I've been in the industry for, 30 years now, and I used to be a programmer. one of the things that I found, right, as I, and I'm not a programmer anymore, but I still carry that logic into everything that I do, is the flow charting, right? Like a wireframe, right? Kind of create a flow chart. How what is you want to do, and to your point, the modules, key important things to do, but also keep a top-down design, right? And also as you're going through your code, always write up a little notepad on the side, which what I do, and I put a command and then evaluate it. If it didn't work, then kind of revert it, right? That way that's who broke it. And and now use ChatGPT to help you troubleshoot that in some kind of way, right? So that way you're not overwhelming the system with all the prompts and all that stuff, because you can get into a rabbit hole where you'll screw it up even more. So small, gradually, flow design is what I always encourage people to do.
Yeah, and like even with that, even with your design, even with your flow designs, right? So like Claude is really good at those, actually. Like if you can explain to it well enough what you're trying to do, it will create mermaid diagrams, which are how your system hangs together. And you can look at those and say, okay, well, actually, that probably doesn't make sense, Claude. Can we change this bit? And once you have those diagrams, again, put it in your documentation for cursor to reference, because then if it feels like it's going off course, you can say, go back and check the design, go back and check the PRD, go back and check the mermaid diagram, and just make sure we're on course. It's a really good point. I appreciate you raising that.
Of course. Can you add rules as you create in your, I mean, I know that the thing you show, those rules will be part of that, right? So that would be like the prompt, how you want it to behave as you go into your design.
So
right?
what you can do is, so within this little chat box down here, you can add context, right? So in the background, it should have, generally speaking, the context of your code base. If it's massive, it probably won't have all of it, but it will have a good understanding of what your code base is trying to do. If you are trying to get it to look at something specific, you can add that here. So you can see, you can add actually just this file. Can you just go and look at this file for me? Or within docs, can you go and look at this specific doc for me? So if you are working on a specific piece and you wanted to look at a specific doc, you can absolutely tell it to do that in here. And not only docs, you can see, you can, like I was saying, you can point it at particular files in your code base. You can point it at your Git flow. You can point it at your past chat, specific cursor rules if you don't feel like it's paying attention. So you have the option to make it look at something specific. What I would advise, though, which is something I actually only thought about yesterday, is instead of adding, because you can see from the docs that I had in there, like I have a ton of docs in the background that I can reference, and my code bases get very big very quick, and I can't sensibly keep all that in its memory. So what I thought is, well, actually, I don't want to give it all the context all the time, so I'm going to create a smaller doc, which is like bullet point instructions. So if working on Supabase, check this doc. If working on yada yada, and like the beauty is, right? So when you have your docs in, just see if it will let me do it. So you could just do it's not gonna be. All right, forget that for a second. What you can do is drag your file down here and say, okay, there's a reference for the thing I want to talk about. Now, if your document over here is just that like bullet point of like 5 or 10 things, to just make sure it has pointers, reduces the context, but it gives it the ability to go and question things when it needs to. Does that make sense? So,
100%.
yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, cool. Alrighty. So,
Mhm.
what does it look like when you? Sorry, someone gonna ask a question?
Yeah. Just want to follow up on the chats. My experience is also that it confuses. If you're working on larger or longer on something, then it starts getting confused and looping in errors. And what always helped for me is to create a new chat. And before I do that, I let it summarize also what we have done so far, and put that summary at the beginning of the next chat so that we know what we have done and that we are PRD step 2. We have completed that, and so that I keep the progress also updated and in the new chat.
Yep.
Or do you track that in the document?
Like
do you have to update it?
So yeah, like what I would normally do is like when as I'm starting in my technical implementation in this plan or similar, I will say, okay, go through this plan and give me a list of all of the specific tasks in a logical order, broken into sections that we can work through. Then you start from the top, you work through one section, you say, okay, go back and mark that section as complete based on what you've done. New chat. Then you do new chat. And then and when you're in the new chat, you do exactly the thing that you were saying. You say, okay, go and look at our progress, go and look at the code base, catch yourself up. It will catch itself up, and then you go off again with your new feature.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. Okay, right. So what do you end up with at the end? Well, actually, like, you know, at a very basic level, you end up with stuff that's reasonably cool. Now, I'm going to show you this, and I want you to understand there's nothing on this page that isn't AI generated, right? Including the pictures. This is the only extra work I had to do for this, was go into Midjourney and just get a picture of different dogs doing different things. But this is as close to a one-shot prompt as I could get it, right? This now, like, obviously completely made up, and, you know, it doesn't do a bunch, but you know, it's a really good starting point. So from here, you go down to about, and it'll tell you that. You can go down to services. Now, I did not tell it to do these things. I just gave it the PRD of the high level what I wanted to do, and it did all of these things. This is the beauty of it, right? So it gives you really good places to start from. And like, this is, you know, it looks cool and there's animation on it. Actually doesn't do anything. It's just it's a reasonably static web page. But you can see, like, if you can do this in 25 minutes, and anyone can do this in 25 minutes, like, you don't need any particular skill set to do this. If you think about building something for your clients that looks like this and actually has these, you know, services and payment and booking, all that in the background, I genuinely think in 2 to 3 days, you can have a fully working website that you can probably charge a client somewhere in the region of $3,000 to $5,000 from. Because if you were to write this from scratch, have all this stuff in here, build Stripe into the background, like, that's weeks of work. That genuinely is weeks of work. But doing it this way, going oh my goodness, going iteratively, going in small chunks, making sure you keep your context window as small as you can all the way through. You can end up with some really cool stuff. You really, really can. Like, I was amazed by this, like, 25, not because I did it, but, you know, the small amount of information that I get it. And it decided it should have this banner up here. It decided, even the name, I didn't even tell it the name. It made the name up. It made up what the services should be for the dogs. You know what I mean? It goes a long way for you if you limit its scope and have it really focused on things, you know, the individual component or feature that you want to build. You can come up with some really cool stuff. Okay. Question.
Just my sorry to interrupt you. Just my point of view. I don't use a lot Cursor. I just starting, but I'm following another a YouTuber, and he created this tool that it's called Vectal AI, and it's and because he using the Cursor, and it's like very good helping tool that can chunk your tasks.
Yeah, and that I know exactly who that is. That's David Andre.
Yeah,
that tool, Vectal, was built doing this. So he didn't write a line in that code. Now, it took him months, in fairness.
exactly.
Like, it's 6 to 9 months to build it, but, like, the tool itself was amazing. He didn't write a line of code in there, and it's actually really, really good. So. Yeah, I mean, like, what I'm saying is, look, you know, 25 minutes, sure, you can come up with something basic in 25 minutes, but if you put a bit of effort in, you can come up with some really in-depth, useful, valuable stuff that you can sell, for sure. You know what I mean? Like, if you think about, like, that dog grooming website, right? So you could have that as, you could ask it, instead of building me out the complete website, build me out the template that I can plug my services in, and I can plug my pictures of my dogs in, and then you can sell that to different dog grooming companies, as an example. You know what I mean? So it gives you so much more options, and the speed at which it does it as well. Like, it blows my mind. After 10 years in this space, I've never seen anything that has improved productivity across the board for all engineers that use it like this.
Very, very cool. How do you find it compared to Bolt or Lovable in terms of standing up basic front end?
I mean, for me, I like this more because Bolt and Lovable are like very web app focused. Now I realize we're in the age of web apps, and I get that. But like as a back end engineer, that's actually what I am. I want a bit more freedom to build stuff. I don't want it all to be in the browser. So my preference would be this, but it's horses for courses, man. It really is. Like, depending on what you want to do and what you want to build, you'll kind of find the tool. Like, I don't want to say one is better than the other, because like that's not the way to think about these things. The way to think about it is like, what am I trying to do? What am I trying to achieve? Okay, if I understand what I'm trying to achieve, now let me look at the tools available and we choose the best tool from the list for that, because that's what these are. They're tools. They're not, this one is better than everything else. And the same with LLMs, right? They all have different strengths and weaknesses. For coding, in my opinion, there's nothing better than Claude. There's nothing comes even close. If I need to go and research something on the internet, I'm not going to ask, like, even though Claude has that search capability, I'm not going to ask Claude to do that. I'm going to go to ChatGPT, because I know that will give me better results if I need a bit of analysis from the internet. So it, like, for all of these tools, it's just be less focused on which is the best tool, I guess, and more focused on what's the problem I need to solve and what's the best tool for the job. Good stuff. Okay, so we are coming up to time. I'm happy to hang around for a few minutes if there's more questions. If there is anything in this was a very high level overview. I appreciate it, because there's a lot to wrap your head around in this, especially if you're new to it. So if there's anything in here that you feel like you'd like me to go back in another session and just dig a bit deeper into particular areas, I'm absolutely more than happy to do that. I hope you got some value from today. All I was trying to do was introduce everybody to it, very briefly show you how to set it up and get the best use out of it. The last thing I'll say is, don't be afraid of it, right? This is just code. Right? So you can write a piece of code, get 2 days into it, break it, and delete the thing and start again. That's perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. That is a natural part of software development, by the way. I've done that over the past number of weeks. I've probably done that 3-4 times. Don't be afraid to experiment with it. In fact, experiment more, see where its limitations are, see where your limitations are when it comes to it. What do you need to improve? What knowledge do you need to gain to make better use of it?
Hey Rob, I want to ask a question. I posted, thank you for a comment on the post that I put for the workshop. So this would be a good topic to maybe, right, to make it part of a workshop, because I think it will, I be using this a little bit and I have a little understanding, but I think, for other people certainly will be a good tool to, dive in, because it will help with a lot of development, front end and back end as well.
Yeah. And like, dude, it democratizes software development. Like, almost overnight, this has given millions of people around the world the opportunity to build applications where they otherwise wouldn't have been able to. So it's just a phenomenal tool, in my opinion.
Hey Rob, do you using N8N a lot? I have thought about building obviously some software development agents and using Supabase as a place to create like a long-term memory. Do you see any of these companies allowing us to connect to like a Supabase or an Airtable or something like that, where we can create our own long-term memory for it to reference? I was basically planning on creating like a project chat where a project management assistant can discuss with a dev agent, which will have a front-end developer and a back-end developer, and they'll all have access to this chat where they can have this ongoing context. Do you see us going in that direction? And also, to add another point, do you see value in adding technical documentation and README files in a Cursor project for reference?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like, first question about memory. So, as you're all probably aware at the minute, the hottest topic when it comes to memory is RAG, Research Augmented Generation. That relies heavily on vector stores in the background. Now, up until a couple of weeks ago, your choice to do that was your LLM of choice, and then go and find your own vector store in the background. In the past, oh my goodness, 2 weeks, I think, OpenAI have actually released their own vector store. So they've actually done a few things. I don't know if you folks keep up with all these kind of announcements, but they're really useful to follow. So they've done a few things. They have improved their agents SDK, so the actual implementation is much simpler. And they've introduced that vector store in the background natively as part of that agent SDK. So if you don't want to go anywhere, you don't have to. Now, caveat, I've not used it. I don't know how good it is. It might be a bag of crap. I don't know. But it is there. And now that they've done it, I can definitely see others like Anthropic and Google or whatever starting to do that. I mean, you can see from what Google are doing, anyway, they're starting to lean into that a little bit with things like Notebook LM. For example, where you could just, upload, it's easy, it's drag and drop, it's just pointed at a URL. And like, that's where it needs to go, because again, early in this space, trying to set up vector databases for a person that is non-technical is non-trivial, right? That takes a bit of homework to understand what the hell is going on there, and how to make the most out of it. So I don't really see it going any other way. I'd be interested to see who dives in after OpenAI do it. Anthropic is always a little bit slow. Google is normally a little bit quicker off the mark, so I would expect them to do something similar soon.
I did notice that if you go into the back end of OpenAI and you're building assistants, and also maybe you can give me some insight. What is your feeling? What's your stance on fine tuning? Because I'm finding a lot of documents and online research is saying that fine tuning is not quite as prevalent and useful as it was in the early stages of AI. And so now we're just building assistants in the back end. And to your point, if you upload a file in OpenAI and an assistant, it literally lists it as a vector store.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, dude. Like it's interesting. Lost my train of thought. Ask me the first bit of the question again.
So I'll give you some context. So we're trying to create some social media content creators, right? And we want specific outputs for Facebook versus LinkedIn versus a blog post.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, dude. Yeah.
And so we're trying to fine tune, but we're really struggling.
Yeah, I don't know.
Fine tuning.
It's just my opinion. LLMs know so much. Like, they literally have all of the information that's available on the internet available to them. That's what they're trained on, all of them. They're trained on all the information that's available. And when they get new updates, it's the newer information. So I don't know if I put a lot of stock in like fine-tuning stuff, honestly. Now, again, it's, do your own research here. This is just my opinion, but I don't now, like, yeah, to your point, early days, yeah, absolutely, because because the context window was very small early on, like you needed to train it on something specific because it just had a small context window. But now the context windows are getting so big, and the knowledge in the background that it's trained on is so massive that I don't know if I put a lot of stock in actually fine-tuning the models yourself.
Yeah, I think that just building assistants now is pretty powerful. From what we kind of shifted, and I told my team, I said, let's stop with the fine tuning. We're getting nowhere fast, and so we started to try and build in assistants, and we've actually been getting some pretty good results just using assistants.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, dude. I'm not surprised. I mean, that's where the industry wants you to go. Honestly, they want you to build agents. They don't they want to take care of all the model training in the background, which is great because fine-tuning and model training takes a lot of resources. And unless it's massive resources, you don't always get the results that you want. So yeah, lean into agents, dude. That would be my advice, absolutely. All right, any more questions? Sweet. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Did you try? I'm sorry. Did you try Opus? Just quick, yes or no?
Say again.
Did you try Opus?
Opus. It's very expensive. Very briefly, and it's very expensive.
Yeah, because it is open Opus, open source Opus, something like that, and I don't know if to try it or not.
Yeah, and so like a word of caution, right? Generally, and like this applies to any software, including models. Be very careful what you're downloading. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like if you're downloading something from GitHub, don't download something that has 2 stars because you don't know what's in that. and others might have looked in there and thought, I ain't using that, right? And the same applies to any software. You don't download random screensavers and stuff onto your computer because they're probably full of malware, and model files can be no different. So just be careful, and again, not trying to steer everybody away from open source. If it's reputable and has lots of community input, absolutely go for it. But just be careful about which ones you choose.
Thank you.
Welcome. Cool. All right, we'll call it a day.
Hey, Rob, real quick before I go, is there going to be a replay of this? I wanted to kind of go back and reference the settings that you were setting up in Cursor.
Yeah, it's recorded, so I'll put it in Classroom, and I'll drop the link in the community page.
Fantastic. Thank you, sir. I appreciate all your instructions today.
Not a problem. Glad you found it useful. All right, thank you, folks.
Thanks,
Appreciate
folks.
everyone's time. Take it easy. Have a good day.